I'm Virgil Walker, sitting in today for my friend John Amanchukwu. Yesterday morning in Chicago, Ben Crump stood up at the NAACP convention and told the country that the independent autopsy on Nolan Wells came back undetermined. Everybody heard that as a setback. I'm going to make the case today that it's actually a business model. Chad Jackson and April Chapman join me today. This is Disturbing the Peace.
Protector on a mission from heaven. There's too much at stake to be quiet. Let's disturb the peace. Yeah, you. Let's disturb the peace. With John Amanchukwu. Disturb the peace. I'm a protector on a mission from heaven. There's too much at stake to be quiet. Let's disturb the peace. Yeah, you. Disturb the peace. With John Amanchukwu. Disturb the peace.
I have to start with a confession because I don't have the right to say the rest of what I'm about to say without it. 2 weeks ago, I saw the photograph, one black kid with his arm slung around three white friends, everybody grinning, a boat, the 4th of July, right? My thought was not about him. And to be honest, it really wasn't grief. I'd like to take credit for outrage, but it wasn't that either. My first thought was, oh, the picture, this is going to be a problem. I didn't think about the 18-year-old. I didn't think about his mother, 4 boys who had been friends for years. And that photograph is really evidence that not one of them ever really thought about the melanin count in the other as it relates to being friends with one another. Ben Crump looked at that same picture. He saw an asset. I looked at the picture and I saw a liability. Neither of us saw a boy. So let me give you the boy first, because everything I say after this is worthless if I skip him. On the 3rd of July, Nolan Xavier Wells stood in his mother's kitchen and cooked her baked salmon. Christine Wansley had worked a long day. Her son, a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a young man who wanted to be an example to his little brother, noticed that his mother was worn out and made her dinner. The next afternoon, he got on a boat to Horn Island, 10 miles out into the Gulf, and he was last seen sometime that afternoon. 2 mornings later, a park ranger found him at the northwest tip of the island. Now, I want you to hold on to that for a second. For the next 10 minutes or so, almost nobody in this story will actually do that. Yesterday morning, McCormick Place, Chicago, the 117th NAACP National Convention, a standing room only hall, right? Ben Crump stood beside Christine and Elmore Wansley next to the president of the NAACP and read out the preliminary findings of an independent autopsy the family commissioned. And here's what the report said. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined, pending future investigation. Now, Dr. Roger Mitchell, board certified forensic pathologist and president of the National Medical Association, found one focal area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. He found no fracture of the skull underneath it. He found no laceration of skin over it. The body had decomposed to the point that he couldn't tell whether there had been a bruising on the surface at all. He also noted that when the body reached him, some of the tissue from the throat was not in it. Now, that garnered gasps from the room, but before you freak out, let's explain. The Mississippi Medical Examiner had retained it because it was not, and that's the reason it was not there. Crump summarized the whole thing this way. The pathologist, quote, cannot rule out, end quote, that some non-accidental factor contributed to Nolan's death. And then, and I want you to hear this sentence, Crump said that, quote, we have more questions than we have answers at this time, end quote. Now, he's right. That's true. But there's a reason. Now, I want you to watch what happened at the podium, because this is the whole thing. The missing throat tissue got presented as at a national convention as a hole in the case, a gap, something that was taken. A room full of people who loved that family heard exactly what they were meant to hear, which is that Mississippi is hiding something again. Except Mitchell's own report explained it. The state kept the tissue, he said, most likely so it could examine it further. And he called that a common forensic pathology practice, because it is. It's what you do when you intend to look a little harder at something. So the innocent explanation was actually in the report. It was in Crump's hand, and he read past it on purpose. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what is in a man's heart, because I can't see it. And if I pretend I can, I've done the same thing to him that he's doing to those 4 boys. But I don't need to see his heart. I've got the tape. A lawyer took a document that offered him an ordinary answer and an alarming one, and he walked into the microphone with the alarming one. Now let me introduce you to Michael Baden, B-A-D-E-N. Dr. Baden is the former medical examiner of New York City. This guy's important, so hear me out.
Private student loan debt in the U.S. totals about $300 billion. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed. Why refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Refi is not a debt settlement company, and they work with each borrower individually, tailoring each loan to each borrower's specific situation. You will not be calling a faceless call center. Refi can reduce your monthly payment and guarantees interest rates under 6%, ensuring affordability and financial relief. Refi does not care what your credit score is. When the payment on your distressed or defaulted private student loan is so big that you can't ever get ahead in your finances, Refi is surely your best option. You can finally take control of your student loan situation with a plan that works for your monthly budget. Just call 888-YREFI-85 or log on to YREFI.com. That's YREFY.com.
He has performed more than 20,000 autopsies. He did an independent autopsy on Michael Brown in Ferguson. He was brought in on the Eric Garner case in Staten Island. He wrote a book about medical examiners covering up how Black people die in custody. And he is not shy about the thesis. In May of 2020, when the family of George Floyd needed a second opinion that they could trust, the phone call asking Michael Baden to get on a plane to Minneapolis came from none other than Ben Crump. Baden looked at the findings this week, and Roger Mitchell was, and he said this. He said that Roger Mitchell was reaching for straws. Now, I want you to think about that. Let that sit for just a second. The pathologist that Ben Crump recruits when Crump needs credibility just told the country that Crump's current pathologist is grabbing for nothing. And Dr. Priya Banjiri added that every forensic pathologist in America already knows what they already know, that a second autopsy carries inherent limitations because by the time you receive the body, it's already been opened once and it's never going to be pristine. Discoloration at the back of the head can come from blood settling in a body. I mean, that's a whole lot of minutia simply to say that what Ben Crump produced is actually a nothing burger. But here's what I keep coming back to. And this answers really the whole of the story. Uncertainty actually helps Ben Crump. Uncertainty renews this news cycle for him every week. The family's fundraiser has passed $700,000. Tyler Perry and Al Sharpton put $100,000 more as a reward. Byron Allen wrote a check. Colin Kaepernick paid to have the boy's body opened up a second time. Spike Lee showed up. Terrell Owens showed up. The NAACP passed a resolution and gave the podium a national stage on the biggest morning of its convention. Every one of those things requires the question to stay open. And not one of them survives a toxology report that says an 18-year-old went into the Gulf on a hot afternoon and drowned. Now, I'm not saying anybody sat in a room and drew this up on a whiteboard. I'm saying they don't have to. That's not what the incentive is. An incentive really doesn't need a conspiracy. It just needs a market. And a market for a dead black boy with a named defendant attached is the hottest market in American public life. And the market for that same boy with an accident attached to it is actually worth nothing. Here's what I say emphatically. Watch the checks. I say it goes 2 weeks. I actually said this 2 weeks ago, and I'll say it here. The checks are not fighting for black life. They're fighting for the kind of black death that actually sells. And what I want to be careful of here is the word grief. The word grief is not a grift, right? Christine Wansley's grief is real. And the people who gave to that fund, they gave out of love. That's precisely what makes this predatory. You can't run this whole operation on cynics. It only works on people whose hearts are actually broken. There's a woman in Jackson County named Ashley Cole. She's a Chancery Court judge, and her son, Warren, was one of the young men on the boat. She was not on Horn Island, and neither was her husband, not at any point in the day. She deactivated her Facebook account for a few days, the way any mother would when the internet arrives at her door. And the internet read that as a confession. So she came back on to post a statement to dispel rumors with facts. She said her family grieves Nolan too. She said that Warren, her son, loved him. She mentions that she graduated from the same high school as Christine Wansley and that they came from the same community. And that when Warren sat down with the sheriff's department, he cooperated fully. Now, by her account, the boys left at 4:30 in the afternoon because the boat was taking on water and a pump had failed. And Nolan chose to stay and ride back later with another group. I'd say plainly that this is her account and not established fact, but it's also the only detailed account anybody has offered. And the response to it was not scrutiny. It was a mob. Because a judge had to explain to strangers on the internet that her children are not the story. And that's what she's doing this month. While $750,000 moves through a fund and a lawyer works a convention hall. Those 6 children were made in the image of God on the exact same terms as Nolan Wells. So was that boy on the boat. And so is every kid whose name is being typed into a search bar by people who've decided that somebody has to pay for this. And roughly 600 miles north of Ocean Springs in that same Independence Day weekend, listen to this, on West Maypole Avenue in Chicago, same weekend in Chicago, a 17-year-old girl was shot once in the chest at 1:25 in the morning and taken to Stronger Hospital in critical condition. 9 minutes later, listen, 6 more people were shot on that same block. One of them an 18-year-old, the same age as the boy on the boat. Now, I went looking for the names of the 6 people who were shot in Chicago, and I went looking for the name of the girl, the 17-year-old who was shot in the chest. I couldn't find it. What exists actually is a police blotter, and a blotter doesn't record whether she was cooked anybody dinner that night or whether she was close to her parents or her mom. None of that was told. Nobody commissioned a second autopsy on anybody who died in Chicago that weekend. There was no convention hall. There was no press conference. 9 miles from where that girl was shot and bled, there was another convention hall conference about a boy thousands of miles away, but nothing for her. I want you to frame that. This is unbelievable to think about. These people do not care about black life. They only care about black death that sells. Now hear me on Christine Wansley, and I'll begin wrapping things up here because this is the part that actually keeps me up. I'm not going to sit here and pronounce a verdict on a woman's soul. I don't know her. What I know is what I've seen of her. For 3 weeks, she's been taught by professionals that the state of Mississippi is hiding truth from her. She's been taught that the sheriff moved too fast, and that part is true. She's been taught that the missing tissue meant somebody took something, and that's the part that's kind of unnerving. She's been given a framework in which every reassuring answer is evidence of a conspiracy, and every unanswered question is proof of a crime. So when the state report finally lands, and if it says her son drowned, she's not going to be able to receive it. Not because she's a bad woman, but because she's been formed for 3 weeks to refuse that exact sentence. $700,000 and no peace. That's a shakedown. And it was never really about the money. What got taken from that woman was the possibility that the answer might be bearable and that there's no fund on earth that gives that back. Let me be honest about the other side, because I refuse to be a mirror image of the man I'm criticizing. I don't know what happened on Horn Island, and neither do you. The sheriff announced within 2 days that no foul play was suspected before toxicology, but before the state report had given no reason. That was a verdict rendered by a man who had not done the work that produces verdicts. And he handed Crump the doubt that he's been spending ever since. There are real questions sitting on the table. How does an 18-year-old get left on a barrier island 10 miles out by 3 friends who drove him on the boat? Why was his phone at the friend's house that night? And why does his family say messages were gone from it? The sheriff himself asked the public for a video of alleged altercations on the island, which meant the sheriff has heard something. Those are legitimate questions, and I want them answered. A grand jury is going to hear this. Good, let it. What I'm against is the manufacture of certainty in the absence of evidence. And that charge lands on both ends of this thing. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. That's Leviticus 19:15. That verse forbids the thumb on the scale in both directions. A sheriff who clears his county in 48 hours is guilty of that same thing. So is the lawyer who convicts 4 teenagers with a report that says undetermined. Here's the final verdict. Christ is the only man who ever lived with a genuine grievance and didn't reach for it. When he was reviled, he didn't revile. In return, he suffered. He didn't threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. There is a judge. There will be a complete accounting of what happened on that day on that island, whether or not Jackson County actually produces it. This is not a consolation prize. This is the reality of the world we live in. So here's what I'm asking you. Wait for the report, then accept what it says, whatever it says. That will cost some of you something, and you shouldn't count that as a cost out loud in front of your children, because they're watching you. They're trying to decide whether to land on the framework of truth. But before you give the next thought process a voice, pray for that family. Pray out loud. Pray for Ashley Cole and the 6 children by name too. Because all of the people in this situation are in need of prayer. And refuse any certainty to do something otherwise, to adjudicate this process in your own mind based upon melanin count. That's the wrong way to do this. I don't know what happened to Nolan Wells. Neither do you. And at this time, neither does the sheriff or his lawyer. And the only person in this entire story who has to live with that reality, she was served dinner in her kitchen on July 3rd. Pray for that family. Joining me on this edition of Disturbing the Peace is my friend, Chad O. Jackson. He's a historian, a documentarian, and a researcher who's starred in the 2020 film Uncle Tom and returned for Uncle Tom 2, which he also co-wrote and co-produced. His film company released a debut independent docuseries, The MLK Project. He's the father of 4 whose research centers on what happened to the Black family since the Civil Rights era. He's a frequent voice on podcasts and news programs everywhere. He always is presenting the case for Christian moral ethics and intentional citizenship. I'm proud, privileged to call him my friend, and my man Chad joins me right now.
Hey, Virgil. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, brother. Honored to have the opportunity that John provided for me to carry some of the load of his show. He's always out there doing great things. I'm honored to be connected with him, honored to be connected with guys like you, men who have families, men who understand what it means to have a family, to have a wife, to have children, and to care for those children deeply, which is one of the reasons why, Chad, what I'm watching unfold with this Nolan Wells issue actually breaks my heart. heart. And it does so from a standpoint of just the weight of grief that I or you or anyone would feel at the loss of their child would be devastating. It would be so gripping. I dare to say we would not be able to get out of the bed. If we were on the other edge of that, it would be, hey, we're going to go find answers. But I can tell you the last person that I would go looking for answers from would be somebody like Ben Crump. And, yesterday he was engaged in he was at the NAACP there in Chicago at their national convention, laying out the facts for Nolan Wells' second autopsy. I don't know if you had a chance to review that, to see that. What are your thoughts and what are you seeing?
Well, what I know from that autopsy press conference is, for one, that, the claim was that the results were undetermined. And then two, Benjamin Crump lied about, I think it was the Navy, something, I forget the name of the institution that is supposed to, I guess, police that area, or, the waters of that area.
Yes.
Where they said that, Benjamin Crump claimed that they said that they found Wells's body face down, fully clothed. But then they responded and said, no, we didn't find his body face down, fully clothed. He was, in fact, wearing swim trunks. And so Benjamin Crump basically lied on national television. And that's what they're interested in. It's interesting because whenever Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton, whenever they did the eulogy for the funeral on Monday, both of them said that they're only interested in the truth. But the reality is that they're not interested in the truth at all. They're interested in a narrative. And this is why it's, not a problem for Benjamin Crump to lie or to misrepresent the facts or to contort the details, because he's trying to spin a narrative that he might emote and sensationalize the issue, because what it does is it keeps people paranoid. It keeps people resentful, especially, colored people. But then, too, it keeps them relevant. It keeps the Benjamin Crumps and the Al Sharptons of the world relevant. And this has been going on for quite a long time in this country. So
I totally agree. It's amazing to witness. I think about guys like you, guys like me, when we are in front of an audience, we want to articulate our words clearly, precisely. We want to present ourselves in the most polished way. Here's a man who's supposed to be a lawyer, who's reading an autopsy report and is stumbling over the word subcutaneous. I would think that if he were knowing that he was going to be on a national platform, would at least have read through the document enough to be able to articulate the words clearly. It was flatly an embarrassment. And what this speaks to is our willingness to embrace whoever, whatever, it causes us to emote as it relates to race and racism. It absolutely drives me insane. It's crazy to me, Chad, that this guy is a national figure. Like, you should be a national figure, right? John Amanchukwu is definitely a national figure. Like, these guys that are getting platforms like they have, to the degree that they do, and the money that drives them, it's mind numbing. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, though, like, their relevancy is predetermined for them. And, as somebody who studies history, you can see Booker T. Washington, pulling their card as early as 1911 in his book, My Larger Education. You see it all the way throughout the 20th century with all of these civil rights leaders that were made prominent by the press, by the media, by education and academia, and in many churches, unfortunately. So the thread continues on into today. That blueprint is already laid out for them, where all they have to do is, fall right into line, say the right words, chase the right ambulance, tickle the right ears, basically induce the right emotions. And the lie in the narrative just keeps right on going. But what's unfortunate is that, people like Nolan Wells, he didn't ask for this. He didn't ask to be anybody's martyr in this twisted cause. But Thomas Sowell once said that is talking about Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and all these other people. He said that, like, if you look at the progress of any people, of any given people, their progress, their genuine conventional progress, typically is not thanks to a race leader. It's typically thanks to the ethos and the things that the individuals within that given culture do to better themselves, to elevate their station in life. Right. To the extent that you see people groups that basically put all of their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their fears into a race leader, that people group struggle. They struggle relative to all the other groups that are out there. Yeah. And I think that, you know, when we look at Benjamin Crump, Al Sharpton and the like, that ilk, it's nothing different.
Yeah. Who's the Asian race leader, right? The Asian population is at the top of the socioeconomic rung right here in America. They're the ones earning more than whites. They're the ones from a standpoint of academics are outpacing in any other category named group. Like, who's their race leader, right? The obvious answer is they have none. It's about behaviors. And you mentioned Booker T. Washington. I'm thinking about the book Up From Slavery. I think that book should be required reading across the country. Every individual, if you've not read it, if you're watching this episode and you've not read it, pick that book up. I'll do you one better. Pick it up and download the audiobook and read through it. I have a challenge, Chad, with reading and have a little form of dyslexia. So I one of the things that helps with that is both listening to the audio and reading the book alongside. And so I want to challenge people to do that, because what Chad is saying from a standpoint of inculcating culture that's transformative is paramount to the success of any people group. Mm-hmm. And that's what's necessary. This race baiting nonsense where we're always playing the victim. It's a Marxist idea. It goes back to the breakdown of society and culture through destruction, through tearing things down. Speak to that just a little bit, if you would, Chad.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's completely Marxified insofar that it goes back to Marx's vision of the oppressed versus the oppressor. The oppressed in Marx's day, from a strictly economic standpoint, being the haves versus the have-nots, or the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, something that you and Daryl Walker, or Daryl Harrison. I got you guys' names mixed up, but the two of you have talked about extensively on just thinking. As you get into the early to middle part of the 20th century, and you see the kind of exploitation, or the implementation, I should say, of cultural Marxism, where you take this economic theory and then you use it in culture as it pertains to race, as it pertains to sex, as it pertains to sexuality, and a whole slew of other things. We're dealing with the practitioners of that from an activist standpoint, where it is their job to say, well, did God really say, in a sense? Right. It is their job to point out why you should be bitter, why you should be upset, why you should be outraged, why you should join the revolution. And it's interesting because, as people like Thomas Sowell and others have documented with their research, and as I have verified with my own research, you saw this upward mobility of colored people in America that was trending in the right direction. Right. But it wasn't until the popularization of the I call them the Blacktivists. It wasn't until the popularization and the kind of putting up on a pedestal of the Blacktivists that they began to kind of breed bitterness and to breed this kind of resentful spirit amongst the colored community, especially during the height of the civil rights movement, that you begin to see this kind of shift and this kind of changing of the trajectory into a downward trajectory, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens. Like, whenever you can get into people's ears from an activist standpoint and tell people you should be bitter, you should be angry, you exploit grievances, you manufacture grievances in some cases, but to the extent that something real happens, like the Nolan Wells situation, you then contort the narrative, exploit it to the high heavens. and you appeal to this kind of revisionist history that many of us are taught in our schools and our upbringing, and that's validated by the time you get to college because it's intensified by that point. You see it in popular entertainment with the music and the movies that reinforces this narrative of the colored man is downtrodden, the colored man is put upon, the colored man lives inside of a systemically racist situation. You have all of this backdrop, all of this kind of indoctrination that's happening from the time you're born. And then when something happens, like a Nolan Wells, like a George Floyd, or whatever the case may be, two cases that have nothing to do with race, by the way, because Derek Chauvin didn't, try to get George Floyd to calm down because he was a colored man. He tried to get him to calm down because he was acting a fool, right? So far as we know, based upon the evidence that has been laid bare as it pertains to Nolan Wells, we don't know if it had anything to do with race, but it looks like it had nothing to do with race at all. And in fact, that he wasn't murdered, but that he maybe drowned or whatever the case may be. We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. But we know at this point, we know it has nothing to do with race. But because a lot of us are kind of hypersensitive as a result of years of indoctrination, unfortunately, it looks like a race thing to those of us who have, for all intents and purposes, a critical race theory lens, through which we see the world. And so that's what Benjamin Crump is exploiting. That's what Al Sharpton is exploiting, is a kind of presupposed critical race theory lens that has been, basically embedded within many of us in a pervasive way. Yeah. So I know I said a lot there, but no, there's a history behind this.
You did. What I hear you saying in short form, Chad, is what we're seeing today with Ben Crump and this particular issue is the fruit, right, of a seed that was sown long ago, right? It's the fruit from a tree sown years ago. Now this is what it looks like in front of our faces, and it's difficult to witness if you've detached yourself from that false tree, right? If you've detached yourself from the tree with the bad roots and said, you know what, I need to ingrain myself into the tree of life, right, and into Christ and His righteousness, right, and you looking back at that and you're going, man, that was really deformed. That was a deformed way to view the world. Those are deformed lenses. You and I both are wearing glasses today, right? If the glasses that you utilize or wear are critical race theory lenses, then you're going to see the world in a very distinct way. Mm-hmm. Everything is going to come up in that same light. As I think about that and I reflect back on what I saw at the press conference, women gasping because of information that was just basic. It was the basic aspect of how things function when people are doing autopsies. I think about how susceptible we are at impulse response, almost Pavlovian, when we hear certain things as it relates to race. My question to you is, and in the short time we've got left, how do we turn this around? You're doing great work with your films and movies and documentaries, trying to get the information out there. In my corner of the world, I'm writing and preaching and teaching and doing the things I'm doing. What's the catalyst to turn things around? How do we change this?
I think you answered the question already with what you're doing with your Substack, with your writing, with your preaching, with the things that you're making ready to do. I think what I'm doing with my films and with the writing that I'm getting ready to do, with all the things that we as a remnant are doing within our skill set, within what God has put on our hearts to do, to basically induce a kind of spiritual reformation that desperately needs to take place. And Virgil, I mean, it just really comes down to faithfulness, because we look around and we see this dark and dying world. We see the Benjamin Crumps and others. We see on the other side how their kind of maneuvering is in some instances causing a kind of reactionaryism when it comes to a lot of white people. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen this far and wide, but there are some white people who are going to other extremes out of a kind of reactionaryism, not realizing that the goal of cultural Marxism is to cause a kind of reactionaryism. I mean, you read somebody like Asal Alinsky, who said in his book, Rules for Radicals, that the reaction is more important than the action. Yes. In other words, you do things to get people to act an uncivilized way, to say extreme things, that further causes confusion, right? This is the kind of Hegelian dialectic thing that's happening right now. But we are, as a remnant, are called to honor a God that is not a God of confusion, right? And we're called to be faithful. We're not always going to see. In fact, most of the time, we're not going to see what's going on around the corner. We can only see what's right in front of us. But God does see the bird's eye view. He does see the bigger picture. We can't see it. All we can do is be faithful and trust that our work, and do our work as unto the Lord, trusting that it is him who's going to turn this thing around. All we can do is our own little parts in our own little way. As frustrating as it might be to see that things don't look like they're going in the right direction. Right. But I trust and believe that all things work together, and that, in the end, God wins, quite frankly. It may not look like that's what's happening right now, but I know that he is. So Absolutely. All I can do is be faithful.
Absolutely. Well, Chad, tell everybody what you're working on, where they can find you, how they can be paying attention to what you're doing, and so we can get the word out.
Yeah, you can find me at Chad O. Jackson on X, IG, and Facebook. And you can find me at chadojackson.com if you want to learn more about our films.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm grateful for the platform that my dear friend John Amanchukwu lent me. I'm grateful to call you friend and to have you here. Man, I look forward to the work that you and I and others will be doing in the days to come. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And that was Chad Jackson. Love that dear brother. He does some fantastic work, and I want to encourage you to go back and listen to what he shared, the directions that he pointed you to identify more of his fantastic work. Up next is my friend, April Chapman. April is a Christian conservative commentator. I'll let her fix that title if she so desires to when she gets on. She's a speaker. She's the host of Unshakable with April Chapman. And her podcast runs cultural issues, political issues, theological questions, all of it through the lens of a biblical worldview. She's the founder of Standard House Media, a Christian media company producing podcasts, documentary work. She's an ambassador with Project 21 and the National Center for Public Policy Research. Most important, this is my friend. She's my friend. This is Miss April Chapman. April, thanks for joining us here on Disturbing the Peace. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. I think I saw you on an episode with John maybe a week ago, or maybe not even that far ago. I'm like, my sister is getting around.
Yeah, it was about a week ago. We discussed some cultural things, and I'm excited to get into today's topic.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it. As I watched, yesterday's press conference with Ben Crump, and saw him stumble through the reading of this toxicology report. It was an autopsy that he ran through, which was a big nothing burger. I don't want to give away too much of it here up front, but I was jaw dropped that there were Black leaders in a room that allowed him even to take the stage to speak in the ways that he did, in incoherent ways. You and I both are in front of a camera, often are on stages. Often we work on our elocution, our diction, right, our enunciation, and for someone not to be able to say words like subcutaneous, as a lawyer, I couldn't. I had a difficult time taking anything that he said seriously as he stumbled through that. And again, there's a whole larger issue, and I won't stack too much into this front end, but there's a whole larger issue of just the pimping of this family's loss that really is irritating. What thoughts do you have as you kind of looked at the whole thing?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing. I'm so glad you sent it to me, and I wanted to watch it with a critical eye. And something that you just mentioned about the family, and very early on, I felt as if, this family's grief is being exploited. They're incredibly vulnerable right now, and they kind of just want to know what has happened to their son. And the more that Ben Crump speaks, the more that the family is in front of the cameras, the less and less that I am starting to believe that they are being taken advantage of. At this point, I'm of the opinion that they are willing participants. I watched that entire press conference, and I was trying to figure out, why is a pathology report being communicated at a civil rights convention, and then why is the subject matter expert, the professional in this circumstance, why is he not the one communicating the findings of this report? You've got an inarticulate, thick-tongued, Ben Crump, listen, okay? I have friends that are attorneys, and the amount of reading that they engage in, and just all that goes into achieving the status of Esquire. He just doesn't strike me as someone that has the aptitude to have completed any sort of course study as it comes to law and civics. But what struck me while watching that room, it wasn't merely the presentation of an incomplete autopsy. Let's be clear. What was presented is incomplete by their own admission. But it was the spiritual posture of the people in the room receiving it. I watched grown men in that room and women sit there and surrender all of their discernment to a very familiar script. Remember, this is Mississippi, and they weren't being shown conclusive evidence that a crime occurred. They were given, this ordinary or incomplete findings, and they wrapped it with lots of suspicion. The racial grievance was still there as an undertone. And I just felt like this whole charade served as another chapter in the never-ending story of Black victimization.
Yeah. It was amazing to witness. They leveraged, Emmett Till. This is Mississippi. They you said it. Every aspect of the playbook that they could pull together was strung together for the purpose of pulling on heartstrings. They had the mother there speaking. I agree with you. You're a mom. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, besides I know you give sharp political commentary on this. I was interested in your take on the mother, because as a dad, man, if something happened to my son, the man in me would want to know what the heck happened. I couldn't fathom in my mind what I would be feeling. I know my wife. She would be I would have to peel her out of the bed, out from under the covers for her to the weight of the grief would be so great that my job would be twofold: getting her out to breathe and to get light, and then at the same time aggressively pursuing what transpired. And so as I saw them, the couple there behind the stage, I recognize people respond to grief differently. I get that, but I can tell you, April, beyond a shadow of a doubt, if that happened to my child, you'll never have to, in your wildest dreams, think, I know what Virgil and Tamika are going to do. They're going to go grab Ben Crump and have him kind of fight this. But that in a million years, listen, if I had 1,000 lives to live, it would never be one that would include me finding Ben Crump for anything I was doing, ever.
Exactly.
And so as you watched her presentation, again, I don't want to attribute motive. I don't know what they're doing. I am dumbstruck. But as a mom, family person, someone who has children at home who you care for deeply, whose faces I know and see, and I'm connected with you on. Like, how do you process that?
Yeah, as a mom, the first thing that struck me is something that we saw parallel, very similar to what we witnessed with the Carmelo Anthony situation. We saw a mother with the mother positioned as the spokesperson for the family. I know some people are saying, oh, well, why would you bring that up? Why does that matter? For me, it matters. I just would have preferred the father to be leading the charge of speaking on behalf of the family. But, we can get into a conversation about that a different day. I've noticed that, like you said, grief hits people differently. Some people fall apart. Some people, I know when my dad passed, I managed to just pull myself together, and staying busy and just getting things done was on the forefront of my mind. What I did not do was, or should I say, I was completely uninterested in traveling the country. I mean, this woman's been in New York and then Chicago and, back to Mississippi. I mean, she's got like a full schedule going on. And what I'm noticing is that the framing of this entire story is framed around justice for Nolan Wells. Right. And the question that I keep asking is, justice for what exactly? What injustice has been proven? We haven't had any concrete information. When you listen to the results of the pathology report that Ben Crump read, they indicate that so much of the investigation hinges upon other components, meaning the toxicology report. You need that information. But what they did was they framed it like, well, we don't have his throat and we don't have his stomach, to imply that something nefarious is happening, knowing that they need those components in order to properly interpret the results of the pathology report. I'm not even a coroner, and I had sense enough to know when I heard it, I said, this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So don't talk to me about justice for Nolan when justice means that you have to follow the evidence wherever it leads. It doesn't mean that you get to invent what I'm calling a pharaoh here, right? Where something nefarious has happened before the toxicology report even comes back. You can't treat every unanswered question as proof of a conspiracy, right? Yeah. So as a mom, I just don't understand why a family would allow themselves to be the next poster child amongst the list of other race hoaxes. Let's be clear. We heard Ben Crump rattle off a laundry list of fake race hoaxes. And we heard the audience, they were just clapping and saying, yes, sir, and as if he's accomplished anything in any of these cases outside of us knowing their names.
Right. That part is striking. I was talking with someone yesterday about this, and the eliciting Emmett Till is an opportunity. This was kind of what was posited. Eliciting names like Emmett Till is an opportunity to ensure that Nolan Wells' name lasts forever alongside an Emmett Till, right? Now, we don't have any degree of understanding of any nefarious action that's taken place that would land that punch, right? We don't have anything that's to substantiate that idea, but maybe that's the goal. And my response to that was this, and I want to see how it lands on you. That event, the NAACP event, took place, in Illinois, in the Chicago area, just not very far from an incident during the same time that Nolan Wells was killed. There were 6 young people that got shot. There were actually 19 people that got shot. 6 of them actually went to the hospital there in Chicago on the same weekend. All of them Black. 2 of them the age of Nolan Wells. And while this press conference was happening just miles away from where they were, none of their names were ever mentioned. Right. And so really what Ben Crump and others do is they navigate opportunities. They look for opportunities where money can be made, where funds can be drawn. Right. So the only life that really matters is not a life that ends in death or Black life. It's a Black life that died at the hands of somebody white. And in this instance, we don't even know it was at the hands of somebody white. We just insinuate that for the purpose of drumming up dollar bills. Your thoughts on that thesis?
Yeah, I listened during the press conference. Ben Crump mentioned that, it's important for the NAACP to be involved in this because, you know, the life of this Black child mattered and it's so important. And like you, I'm sitting here like, well, what about, you're in Chicago, Chirac, right, to be specific, and you don't seem to be remotely concerned, but it's because the factors, the necessary conditions that make this case different from them is that a white person is involved. They have to, or they are able to invoke the history of what happened down in Mississippi with Emmett Till. Like, they've primed an audience to already be suspicious, regardless of the fact that the investigators have not finished gathering the facts. I'm reminded, I don't mean to shift the conversation, but it was hard watching this, looking at how far Black Americans have come in this country. Yeah. And when I think about what I witnessed in that room, I thought about the children of Israel and how God brought them out of Egypt and did so many miraculous things. You got signs, wonders, the blood, the judgment, mercy, manna from heaven. And yet, what did the children of Israel continue to do? Even after their liberation, right, bringing them through the Red Sea, they keep looking backward, right? Mm-hmm. They start thinking about all of the luxuries of Egypt, the cucumbers and the onions and all of the things, but they somehow forgot the whips, right? Yeah. All of the oppression that they lived under Egypt. That bondage in the psyche and in the mind, it makes captivity so familiar. And you can't even recognize that you do know y'all are free, right? It's like they don't even know that they're free. They want to just pull the heartstrings and pull out the baby violin so they can continue to re-adjudicate all of the victimization that has happened to them, versus the fact that could this have been a simple accident of a young man out with his friends, and the riptide caught him? It can't be that. Right. It can't be that.
Right. Yeah. I wrote a piece about this maybe 2 or 3 days ago. Two things I thought about was, you know, my son is, you know, not with us. He's in another state away from us. And he's got a lot of friends. The vast majority of them are white. I don't concern myself, A, with their ethnicity, or B, with any thought process that something nefarious is going to happen because of the color of his skin or theirs. Right. I do think about young men at that age who don't think, right? Who are not risk averse, who will do anything, who will jump off of whatever, right? Who make poor decisions, you know, based upon just a lack of understanding or value of life or what have you. They could be in a car, in a boat, you know, in a house, and something bad happened because of the awful decisions that they make. And none of those things, while God forbid any of them are catastrophic and end in death, none of those things would have anything to do with the color of his skin. Or theirs. It's just dumb boys doing what dumb boys do. But that, at this point, because of the narrative that's been permeated, that's not even that answer will never be an option for this family to hear at all. Yeah. Let me ask you this as we kind of wrap up on time. I wanted to maybe hear from you. I know a number of the things that you're doing, the podcast that you do regularly, it's blowing up, the podcast episodes that you're on everywhere, the work that you're doing with our dear friend Vince Ellison, and all of the documentaries that you're doing. Like, how do we change this? Is it simply people like you, guys like me, people like John Amanchukwu continuing to do what we do? Is there something else? What's the answer to turning around this cultural idea?
I think truth, when we use it, can be used as a disinfectant, right? So it's a multifaceted approach. We've got to speak truth to these situations. We've got to elevate and amplify our voices to make sure, be fair, but do not shirk back from the truth. We've got an entire generation that's coming up behind us that are looking at us now completely confused, because they're like, I know they keep saying this racism is everywhere, But in my lived experience, in my kids, in your kids' life, they're like, I just don't see what it is. Like, y'all want me to have so much passion that I'm ready to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and I don't even know what I'm walking across this bridge for. Right. So in order for things to change, I believe voices like you and I, they need to be amplified, and we need to be willing to just speak the truth. Yeah. It's one thing to tell people that you love, you're not a victim. You're not oppressed. You are an heir of Jesus Christ, a child of God. And sometimes they hear you and sometimes they don't. But allowing the other side to keep speaking, they tell on themselves all of the time. They've gotten a little bit more clever with it because they now know that their credibility is on the line. You have people like Tamir Rice's mother. She's already cracked the code on how much of an ambulance chaser that Ben Crump is, and that he's incompetent and is unable to deliver on justice if one believes that they've been wronged. So allowing that other side to talk, and then not allowing the story to die once the truth comes out or it ends up being inconclusive. We still need to discuss this. We need to expose the cultural Marxist overtones that are being vividly expressed, make the connection between the civil rights apparatus and the pulpit pimpery apparatus and then the political race apparatus. Like all of those politicians and woke athletes, we need to be able to make connections and make it plain for people to see and say, you know what, they got me last time. They may have got me with Trayvon Martin, and I was kind of on the train when it came to George Floyd, but now my eyes are they're too wide open, and I'm awake, but I'm not woke.
That's exactly right, man. That's well said. Where can folks find you, hear about what you're doing, keep up with what you're doing, and support what you're doing?
Absolutely. The Unshakable with April podcast is right here on YouTube. They can go to my website, unshakablewithapril.com. I am also right now actively working on partnered with Vince Everett Ellison in a documentary called Slavery is a Choice, and we're crowdfunding that. And the Lord has been so gracious and kind to us with that project. So you can learn all about that going to my channel on Unshakable with April here on YouTube. I'm also on X, Facebook, Instagram, and I think I'm on the TikTok. I think so. Yeah. You got a fantastic team doing incredible work. Sis, we got to connect. I've got more stuff I'm getting ready to do, meeting with some folks. Would love for you to be a part of that as well. And man, thank you so much for joining me on this platform. You are welcome. God bless you, friend.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
That was April Chapman doing her thing. And man, I encourage you to go check out everything that she's doing on Unshakable with April Chapman. She's doing great work. April and I go way back. And so know her well, trust her work. And man, it's been a joy to be with you on this episode of Disturbing the Peace. I'm such a fan of my brother, John, and was blessed by the opportunity to be in his movie, his documentary, 22 Words. If you haven't seen that, you need to go check it out. He's got some fantastic people in that as well. We're going to continue to push this forward. We're going to continue to tell truth, to shame the devil, to walk uprightly, and to honor God in ways that we can as he gives us strength. And so, again, grateful for the chance to be here. Thanks for joining us. Check us out next time on Disturbing the Peace.